Hi there, it's Brendan. Happy 2021. Well, soon. I assume it'll be 2021 when I upload this. I'm here to talk about my favorite albums. Let's get started. When the single At the Door came out, I thought, I don't understand why people like this. It sounds so off-kilter. And then I listened to it more and more, and it grew on me to the point where it's one of my favorite songs from this year. What really makes this album shine is the songwriting coupled with some really great production choices. And the Strokes aren't afraid to drag the song length out a little bit to get into a groove, to explore different sonic ideas. This is some fantastic alt-rock that's really sweet on the ears, so I really recommend you check this out. As an introduction to Shygirl, this is a fantastic EP. Looking at that creepy, bizarre album cover is certainly unnerving, but in a way it feels like it matches the music, which is both very over-the-top, danceable, fun, but it's also really grimy, and there's an eerie undertone to all of it. Chris Stapleton has such a distinctive growly voice, and he really lets it shine on this album. There are a lot of songs here that really make good use of his voice. Also, the production is pretty understated, focusing just on the instruments without really any electronic embellishment. It allows a fantastic songwriting to really shine through. I saw that there was a lot of negative reaction to this album when it came out, and maybe there still is, because a lot of this can be interpreted as faux edgy and kind of cringy because of that. But in my opinion, this album just bangs really hard. I think there are some moments on there that aren't as interesting, but I think the highlights of this album are absolutely fantastic. Take, for example, the run of tracks 2 through 4. Absolutely amazing. This is another album that feels like it's just throwing absolutely everything at the wall. So much of it sticks. It's kind of incredible. It really embodies Dorian Electra's ethos of just being flamboyant and being yourself to the max, to the next possible degree. And I think Dorian Electra really takes it that extra step with My Agenda. So yeah, this is experimental, taking ideas from 2000s era pop and dubstep and kind of campy ideas from all over the place and really mashing them together into this hyperactive, insane pop experience. Perfume Genius is kind of going in a different direction with this album. So a lot of the instrumentation is a little less polished. There's a little more haze over some of these tracks, but I think it works fantastically, and the songwriting is on point as always. So if you're interested in art pop, baroque pop, that sort of thing, you should give this a shot. Over time, I began to realize that this is like the most consistent album of 2020. The production on it really just elevates the songs that are there. Oftentimes, they make some pretty unusual choices in the production, but it really pays off. A great example is on the song All That Ever Mattered, where they have these screams going on in the background that back up the chorus of the song. Somehow, they're like really grating, but somehow they work so well on the song. Run the Jewels have got to be one of the most consistent acts out there. I don't know what it would take for them to make a bad album. They consistently bring fantastic energy, some just really clever flows and topics. I feel like they always have their finger on the pulse of civil rights and human rights right now. I did find this one to be a little more uneven, really high highs and some only decent lows. I think the most notable thing about this new album from Lianne Havas is the recording sounds very raw and untouched in a way. It sounds kind of like we are getting snippets of studio sessions that haven't necessarily been mastered. Obviously, they have been mastered. The feeling of the album is very raw, it's very organic, feels very on the spot, like they really honed their performances to the point of perfection. The result is this album that feels very honest and like you're in the same room as the musicians. It's a singer-songwriter, folk, soul album that really has some fantastic songwriting on it. This is a beautiful little pop album. The album opens with an incredibly strong run from Forgive Me to Baby Girl to Do It, and then I also love Tipsy and I love Ungodly Hour. And it comes down to some really great, interesting production choices. They do change it up quite a bit. And also Chloe and Halle's fantastic performances and chemistry with each other. They just sound great over these really smooth beats. And yeah, there's not much else to say about it. They really nailed it with this album. And I can't wait to see what they put out in the future. Tkay Maidza comes through with this absolutely diverse and interesting series of songs that are hip-hop, rap, R&B, pop. She runs the full gamut here, and she is absolutely killing it in every lane. If I had to pick a favorite, it would be Shook. It's one of my favorite songs of the year. This EP is so much fun. It's so weird. The first track features Injury Reserve, but the rest are just Jockstrap. And they go from a normal sounding chill song to something with a lot of synthy angular electronics that kind of devolves into this glitchy spoken word poetic nonsensical insanity, but it works really well. I think every song on this EP is great, and it's worth listening through the whole thing. Going into this album, I definitely expected more of a rock and punk vibe from it, but they really went with quite a bit of electronic elements. And so I was sort of worried about that, but I think it works out really well because they really preserve that kind of punky spirit. It's kind of hard to describe the places this album goes. The performances on this album are quite insane. I think that my favorite moments are when they really pull out all the stops and it feels like the song is totally losing control. To the Door is a great example. It has an A and B section that are just so incomprehensibly different. It's absolutely insane. There's something to this whole album that is morbid, but also really beautiful and poetic and extremely catchy. Usually this type of softer indie rock doesn't move me as much as this did. I think the reason I find this album so amazing is because of the fantastic choices in production and songwriting here. Phoebe Bridgers' songwriting is really captivating, and she's telling all of these intensely personal stories in a way that is not at all straightforward. And so it's easy to get wrapped up in kind of figuring out what she's talking about. And I think the production choices on the album just elevate that. My favorite track on the whole album has to be the closer, I Know the End, which just gives me chills every time I listen to it. It goes into this incredible build by the end, and all this instrumentation comes in, and it feels like absolute chaos. Similar things can be said about the rest of the album. The instrumental choices and the way everything is produced really works to heighten climactic elements and really add subtle nuances to the songs that Phoebe Bridgers writes. I was not really looking forward to this album at first because I didn't really care for the single Don't Start Now. It's grown on me since, but I also wasn't a huge fan of her debut album, and so I really did not expect what Future Nostalgia became, which is this extremely well-written, extremely well-produced pop album. It's got amazing bass lines, it's got string arrangements that are just so beautiful, and throughout, it's extremely danceable. The more I thought about this album, and the more I listened to it, I just realized that it had to be this high on the list. It goes so hard. It's nu metal, I think basically in the style of Linkin Park a lot of the time. They're a band I never listened to, and I don't really know much about them. It strikes this fantastic balance between extremely hard, screaming sometimes, but also being extremely melodic. I think a great example of that is Kingslayer, which features baby metal. The main guitar riff and hook on that song is just absolutely blasting out, but you still get that strong melodic synthesizer that goes dun 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 dun. What great folk songwriting. And it's pretty spare. It's mostly acoustic instrumentation, guitar or piano with Laura Marling singing, which feels very close and intimate. But sometimes they do bring in strings and other stuff into the mix. But it's all extremely tastefully done, and it's just so beautiful, and it allows the songs to really shine. You really get a sense of a place and a time in someone's life and the emotions they're going through with what they're going through. I just love Clipping. They consistently make albums that are both insane, bonkers off the wall production and performances, but also so catchy and so clever. This is the sort of sister album of the album that came out last year, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, and I actually think I like this one more than I like There Existed an Addiction to Blood, but they're both fantastic albums. They take ideas from hip-hop and horrorcore and make them just a little more cerebral. They take it up a notch by incorporating new and unusual concepts and going places that I don't feel like any artist working today would really go. Daveed Diggs as a storyteller, he just is absolutely incredible here. And as always, Clipping brings on features in a way that really elevates the songs and just spotlights the talent of that feature. There's almost nothing on this album that does not hit in a way that's absolutely explosive. It's surprising to come across an album like this that is kind of like a disco, 80s electronic throwback album, and that does it in such an organic way. I think there's a lot of 80s throwback going on right now, where everything is kind of going a little synthetic, and there isn't enough organic instrumentation. And Jessie Ware really doesn't make that mistake in her production here. Rina Sawayama continues to show off her incredible songwriting skills here. I absolutely love her fearlessness for going into these unexpected places with her songwriting. STFU is such a massive risk. Not just the fact that she's doing nu metal, but also those lyrics. And then the way she's singing, it's bizarre. And the fact that it pays off makes it just that much more impressive. Then there's the big single Excess, which at first I wasn't so sure about, but now I've realized is one of the best songs of the year. There's Love Me For Me, which is kind of like a New Jack Swing throwback. There's Bad Friend, which feels like a more conventional modern pop tune, but with a slow build that really makes you feel that payoff in the climax. Then there's Chosen Family, which is just the most heartfelt, touching little ballad, immaculately produced. There's some throwback, there's some modern pop sounding stuff, there's all sorts of stuff going on in this album, and the diversity is really what keeps it super interesting.